Hello everyone, it's Jabari here. Today's video is a very exciting addition to my channel for 3 big reasons. Reason number 1 being the fact that I'll finally be creating a video that is solely dedicated to the history of the Mali Empire, an ancient fabled state of West Africa that may quite literally rewrite the history of Africa. I'll elaborate more on that later though. The second reason is that I can trace 23% of my ancestry to Mali according to a DNA test that I took a few years back. So this is probably the most relevant part of my own history that I will have ever talked about to date. Lastly, I'm very excited to have the privilege of collaborating with one of my most favorite YouTube channels of all time, and the awesome animated map timeline that you will see featured throughout this video was created by him. If you would like to see this full video, you can do so by visiting his channel, which I'll link below in the description. Thanks for watching, and I really hope you guys enjoy. The country of Mali is named after the medieval empire of Mali. However, the modern day country is a mere shadow and all but an insult to its former glory and wealth. The Mali Empire is one of the most impressive yet least discussed empires in sub-Saharan African history, despite the fact that it was one of the first sub-Saharan African empires known to Europeans in the Middle Ages, and for good reason. The region in which the Mali Empire existed shows evidence of organized and permanent human settlements from as early as the year 2000 BC. These people were some of the earliest practitioners of agriculture and ironsmithing in sub-Saharan Africa. The first known state in the area was the Ghana Empire, also known as Ouagadougou or Akwar, founded by the Soninke people in the 7th century. Most of what is known about the empire comes from the writings of early Islamic explorers in the region. It reigned supreme as West Africa's most powerful and influential empire until it was severely weakened by the Almoravid expansion, eventually splintering into 12 smaller states by the 13th century. Among these was the Kingdom of Soso, which would go on to conquer Kalumbe Sale, the former capital of the defunct Ghana Empire. They would then go on to conquer surrounding Mandinka states in an attempt to establish control over the former realm of the Great Ghana Empire. Among those conquered, the exiled ruler Soundiata Keita established a confederation of states to oppose the ambitions of the Soso Empire in 1234. In 1235, Samguru Kante, ruler of the Soso Kingdom, finally confronted Keita's forces in the Battle of Krina in what is now the Kolikoro region of modern-day Mali. Keita's army was composed of poison archers from the state of Do, fire archers from Ouagadougou, and heavy cavalry from Mema. This diverse agglomeration of warriors would inflict a crushing defeat on Samanguru's army. Following his victory, Soundiata Keita would lead his army to conquer Soso, the capital of the Soso Kingdom. This battle took place at dawn and utilized the fire archers from Ouagadougou previously mentioned, which allowed Soundiata's forces to scale the walls of the city. After decisively defeating Samanguru, Soundiata would go on to besiege and conquer all of the fortified cities within the realm of Soso. The victory in the Battle of Krina previously mentioned marked the effective genesis of the Mali Empire. Keita would take on the title of Mansa, the Mandinka word for king, which would be applied to all future rulers. This story is recorded as a poem in the Epic of Soundiata, preserved through generations of griots all the way back from the 13th century. From this point forward, Mali would continue to expand its borders at the expense of its neighbors, and grow wealthy from conquering gold mines in the south and the salt mines to the north. They would also go on to claim the title as the richest, most powerful, and well-known empire in all of West Africa's rich and complex history. This was accomplished due to Mali's excellent system of governing conquered peoples, allowing them to remain relatively autonomous as long as they paid their taxes and responded to all calls to arms. The military structure of Mali was highly complex, and for that reason, it would take entirely too long for me to cover it all in this video. It would probably require its own dedicated video to fully break it down with any sort of justice. Mansa Soundiata Keita is credited with creating the highly organized structure known as Tontigi. It was composed of 16 units of cavalry, commanded by bowmen of noble lineage. Similar to European horsemen at the time, these units were composed entirely of men of varying degrees of nobility, as they were the only warriors who could afford horses of their own. They were typically equipped with chainmail or quilted cotton armor and iron helmets, and carried a variety of weapons ideal for cavalry charges such as longswords and lances. These cavalry forces were arguably the most important part of Mali's military, due to the location of the empire being primarily in a vast expanse of arid grassland known as the Sahel. The Sahel is a transitional region between the Sahara Desert to the north and the rainforest to the south. This region is analogous to the steppes of Central Asia or the Great Plains of the western United States. Consequentially, horse-riding peoples were the most effective forces in such areas, as they allowed horsemen to carve out relatively vast expanses of land for themselves, like the Sioux of North America or the Mongols of Asia. The Ferrari were another type of cavalry commander that held the title. No, not that kind of Ferrari.
Oh my bad.
The Ferrari, spelled differently than the one our friend was thinking of, were another type of cavalry commander with the title translating directly to Brave Man. These prestigious military commanders were the West African equivalent of European knights or Japanese samurai. They were warriors who had fought side by side in battle with Sundiata, as well as those who fought with his heirs, and commanded their own units of warriors. They could also be found in relatively non-militant positions such as provincial governors. The soldiers who created the bulk of Mali's infantry were referred to as the Sofa. Come on man, really? Again?
Whoops, my bad, dude.
Yep, okay, sure. The Sofa were primarily slaves who were originally used to carry equipment and care for the horses of cavalrymen. Sofa units were typically led by relatives of the royal family, who held the title of Farimba. They were also a class of warriors used extensively throughout many of the other Sahelian kingdoms that would form after the collapse of Mali, such as the Wassalu Empire. At its height, the Empire of Mali was capable of fielding an army of up to 100,000 men, a massive number for any army during that time in history. Mali's military structure would create a basis for several Sahelian kingdoms to come. Contrary to popular belief, Mali was not conquered by Arabs or forced to convert to Islam. It also was not civilized by Arabs, as many people may think. As mentioned earlier in this video, the area was home to urban settlements and centralized states such as Ghana, long before Islam was even born. Islam was both known and practiced in the region since the time of the Ghana Empire, primarily being spread peacefully through trade with Arabic and Berber Muslims. It wasn't until the 9th century, however, that it became a state religion when an unknown Malian ruler converted. According to a text by Arabic scholar al-Bakri, this unnamed ruler witnessed a rainstorm that ended a drought and named it a miracle, which compelled him to fully convert to Islam. This single event led to dramatic changes in the Mali Empire, as it connected them into a greater Islamic world. However, unlike most of the Islamic world, Mali's style of Islam was relatively tolerant. Malian Islam allowed people to practice traditional religions, and in some cases, blend them with Islam. Sort of like an Orthodox Islam, if you will. Women, for example, were not required to wear the burqa or the hijab, and were allowed in positions of power and education, which is atypical of most Islamic states. Timbuktu, which was a world-renowned Islamic center of learning, is believed to have been named after a woman. One direct result of Mali's connection with the Islamic world was the introduction of literacy. West African history is largely dismissed as being mysterious and unreliable, as it is mostly derived from oral historians, or griots. However, the Empire of Mali was a fully literate society containing numerous universities and libraries, the most famous of these being located in the fabled city of Timbuktu, where some 700,000 manuscripts still exist today. These books were written in the Arabic script and in the Arabic language, as well as local languages of the Mali Empire such as Mandinka. Some date back from as early as the 1200s and contain anything from personal letters, medical remedies, mathematics, religious texts, and even astronomy. Founded in 989 AD, Long before Mali's existence, the Sankore University was one of up to 11 universities that could be found in Timbuktu. It was one of the world's oldest universities, not just in Africa, but in the entire world. Only beaten by Morocco's University of Fez, which currently holds the title as the oldest continually functioning university in the entire world. During Timbuktu's golden age, under Mali rule, Sankore University became a center of scholarship. At its height, the Sankore University housed up to 25,000 students at a time, many of which were international. The entire city of Timbuktu itself had a population of around 100,000, just to put that into perspective. Both of these figures are quite impressive for any city or educational facility during that time in the world's history. The Library of Sankore even contained more books than the famous Library of Alexandria. Unfortunately, the colonization by the French, in addition to recent terrorist attacks in 2013, resulted in the burning of large quantities of these priceless books. Efforts are being made to preserve, translate, and digitalize them, and in doing so, the entire history of West Africa could be unlocked. In a similar fashion to how most of East Asia's history was learned from the writings of the Chinese, and most of Europe's history by the Romans, despite many of their neighbors being illiterate until much later in the timeline. The hundreds of thousands of manuscripts of Mali may do the same thing for West Africa's history, if enough interest and funding is directed towards translating and distributing them. In addition to the poverty of the modern-day country, and general lack of foreign knowledge or interest in the manuscripts, this process may take quite some time. Many families also hide them in their homes, and are unwilling to part with them, fearing they may risk the same fate as many did in the past. As cliche as this may sound, a true African Renaissance may arise if these manuscripts are preserved, translated, and distributed digitally. At its height, Mali's northern border rested in the Sahara Desert. To the south, it was bordered by numerous kingdoms and tribes. To the east was the ancient Empire of Kanem, and to the west was the Atlantic Ocean. Determined to expand his empire, Mansa Abubakar II looked to Mali's only true frontier, the sea. He did not believe that the Atlantic was just an endless abyss of water, and compared it to the river Niger. Though it is very vast, it has another bank that can be reached. To satisfy his ambitions, Abubakar II financed the construction of 200 ships, generously stocked with provisions and supplies to explore the limits of the Atlantic Ocean. Weeks later, one of the ships returned, with the sailors claiming to have seen a river within the sea that swept away the fleet, most likely referring to the southern equatorial current. This news only heightened the ruler's interest, compelling him to build an even larger fleet of exploratory ships. His new fleet contained 2,000 ships, with half of them carrying enough provisions to accommodate his men for a year. He would also abdicate his throne and command the fleet himself, departing in the year 1311 from what is now the modern-day country of Gambia. Needless to say, this fleet was never heard from again, and it is possible that it may have arrived in the Americas, though no conclusive evidence of this has been uncovered to date. Mansa Musa would take his place on the throne after his departure. Mansa Musa was by far the most famous man in all of Mali's history. In fact, he was so famous during his time that a rough portrait of him was drawn in the Catalan Atlas of 1375, despite the fact that no Europeans had ever seen him, nor had any been known to have traveled to that part of the world before. There is good reason behind this as well, as he is a man who had accomplished some very impressive things during his lifetime. First and foremost, he holds the undisputed title of the richest man who has ever lived, with estimates of his wealth being valued at $400 billion US. Not to mention, over 50% of the world's gold could be traced back to the mines of Mali during this time. The world was made aware of his immense wealth when he went on his historic Hajj to Mecca in the year 1325. He traversed the Sahara Desert by camel with 60,000 men, and 80 of the camels were used just to carry his gold. He traveled to many cities during his Hajj, giving gold to the poor and spending it lavishly. After returning back to Mali, it was discovered that the gargantuan quantity of gold that Musa spent during his Hajj triggered a massive inflation in the Mediterranean gold market that lasted over a decade. He brought goods back from Egypt, Spain, and Arabia. While his friends to the north were still recovering from his inadvertent market crash, he implemented new techniques for building and architecture that he had learned during his travels. He is also credited with converting the formerly mentioned Sankore University into the international center of learning that it was reputed for, which took place during this building program. His reign is marked also by the conquest of more lands, increasing the wealth of the empire, including northern salt mines and southern gold mines. At least 400 cities existed within the empire during his reign, making it one of the most urbanized regions in the world. Egyptian scholar Al-Umari described the territory of Mali as being almost entirely habited, with the exception of a few areas. There is no single reason why the Mali Empire fell, as it owes its demise to a multitude of internal and external causes. Perhaps the first of such events is the Mali Civil War, which began in 1270 and lasted roughly 4 years. Mansa Awadi and Mansa Khalifa were both adopted sons of Sunjata Keita, and both amassed forces that struggled to conquer the empire. During this time, the empire weakened and all but crumbled, which the Kingdom of Gao saw as an opportunity to break free from Mali rule. After the death of Mansa Awadi, Mansa Khalifa was able to bring the empire back together, but failed to reconquer Gao. It wasn't until the reign of Abu Bakr I that Gao was finally added back to the Empire of Mali. This was a wake-up call to the Mali Empire on just how fragile their empire was if not properly managed. Immense amount of political and organizational changes took place from here on out, and the empire expanded larger than it had ever been over the next century. However, in the 15th century, things began to take a turn for the worst. The Mali Empire began a downhill spiral of decline, with Gao breaking free once more, and this time, Mali was unable to regain control. This was followed by a chain reaction of other cities and provinces breaking free and establishing their own kingdoms. In 1444, Portuguese explorers began raiding villages and towns on West Africa's coast for slaves. Little did they know, those along the Gambia were under Mali dominion. Though severely weakened, the Mali Empire was still a formidable force within the region. In response to these Portuguese raids, the ruler of Mali dispatched counterattacks on Portuguese vessels, deploying a navy of poison arrow archers. In 1462, after 18 years of defeats, the King of Portugal finally realized that he wasn't just dealing with random tribes, but a powerful empire. He sent an envoy to the Malian court to negotiate peaceful trade relations. Ironically, Mali began requesting military assistance from the Portuguese in later conflicts during the empire's rapid collapse. Unfortunately for Mali, Portugal showed very little interest in military aid. The former city of Gao had grown into the Empire of Songhai and began to undermine Mali's influence, until eventually replacing them as the region's most powerful state. Not only did Songhai replace Mali militarily, but they also grew to become larger than Mali had ever been during its 300-year-long lifespan. Despite this rapid growth, Songhai's influence was short-lived after their military was annihilated in the Battle of Tondibi in the year 1591. A much smaller force of Moroccans was able to defeat the Songhai in battle due to the possession of firearms. What was left of the Mali Empire saw this as an opportunity to reclaim territory from Songhai, but were confronted by the same weapons that took down Songhai's army. Despite this, Mali was still nearly victorious until reinforcements arrived and forced them to retreat. By 1670, the remnants of Mali ceased to exist after abandoning Niani, being replaced by independent kingdoms and chiefdoms. The royal family retreated to the town of Kanagba, where they became provincial rulers. To this day, Mali's mines still produce gold, and its libraries still contain ancient books and manuscripts. This empire was a shining example of the rich and powerful history that was once possessed by numerous sub-Saharan African kingdoms that remain largely ignored, unknown, or simply glossed over in modern academia. We tend to have a standardized view of the world's history, and a default hierarchy of which regions have the most significant historiographies. One good example of this is the fact that the Mali Empire had its own constitution, known as the Korakon Fuga, which was established in the year 1235. This constitution outlined the rights of all Mali citizens and even protected slaves, discouraging their mistreatment and dehumanization. It was basically the Mali Empire's version of the United States Bill of Rights, or the English Magna Carta. I encourage you guys to explore, research, and learn more about African history because it is just as rich and intricate as any other part of the world. Also, if you'd like to discuss history, alternate history, or anything relevant to this channel, you can do so by joining our community Discord, where we talk about cool things like this 24/7. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I put tons of effort into it. Be sure to leave me a like and subscribe if you enjoyed my content. But more importantly, always remember, we don't come from nothing.